Okay, we gotta focus. This focus
Sorry.
product. No phones, no distractions.
Yeah, no, no more chess. Um, I recently I want to get a job, like a summer job, or not recently, but from the very beginning of the summer, I had always anticipated getting a job. I like applied for internships and stuff like early, like in the semester, like second semester.
Hmm.
But like I don't, I guess with COVID, I've heard that like they're like not really doing internships and like the jobs are like still like like coming back from capacity, like don't have extra like I don't know. It's like it's messed with internships,
Hmm.
um, which is kind of I don't- it was a little frustrating. Like I didn't hear anything back, like nothing back, like not even like a no, just like
Yeah,
nothing back from everyone.
that that's sort of the way that it's those kinds of things work. I guess just
Yeah,
lots of waiting, and people are really bad at getting back to people, and that's just sort of always been a thing.
yeah,
Just as a snapshot, since it's a snapshot in time. If hopefully this time it actually sticks. Just for the record, how old are you? And like, where are
I'm
you? And
19.
you're 19, right? And you're
Yes.
how many years in school?
I'm going to be a sophomore in college, and my freshman year, I never, I haven't yet to see the campus. I did on remote for freshman year.
Yeah, it's something that I keep thinking about. Like, you're pretty relatively young, I guess, and it's probably annoying for you to hear that. But like, so I'm 10 years older than you. I'm 29 now, and it really is like. I mean, that's it's worse for me because I have a terrible memory. But like thinking back on like 10 years ago, it's so strange like how different things are. And but like at this moment in time, like with COVID wrapping up, like historically relevant is sort of a thing, but there's also like personally relevant, you know?
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
there's countless memes of like, oh, back in my day, yeah, this and that. And for us it's going to be like back in our day if we had 2 years where we were like locked indoors all day, right? Like
yeah.
what was that like?
I
And
mean, I
yeah.
was very lucky compared to many of the people I knew, um, that were just miserable.
Hmm.
My friend's first year in college, like his school was like very bad at testing. That seems to be like the biggest thing is how often your school tested. Like if
Hmm.
they test all the time, the kids can go out, they can party, they can have a normal year. But the schools that don't test, usually like the kids are just in their room and they have like strict mandates like that. Or it's just like they just have strict mandates and get food delivered and stuff.
Hmm.
So he was in one of these colleges where it's very strict and he had a single and he just didn't see anyone for the
Mm.
entire semester.
Oh
And
yeah,
he just
that's.
so depressed. So
Hmm.
now he's repeating like freshman year. Like he's gonna just like do it again. He didn't go second semester. Like they just after that first semester, he's like, let me just like redo again.
It's so
Uh,
funny. Like single use having a single apartment or dorm was like supposed to be the craved thing, the
yeah,
desirable situation, but it's not when you don't
yeah,
have other people to see.
yeah. So it's pretty like it's very isolating for many kids. I mean, like I had a girlfriend that I was like seeing all the time. Like so I wasn't just like in my room all day. Like we went out,
Hmm.
we did stuff. So it was definitely not as bad for me as many other people.
Yeah, it's there was something that I wanted to talk about with the testing thing. Like I'm looking back on it, it's like really like I don't know if surprising is the right word, maybe disappointing, somewhere in between there. That like
Yeah.
how little people like embraced testing. Like it
Yeah.
there's I'm realizing like I mean we all sort of knew this. This is why it's not so surprising, but like I feel like most of us or at least anyone paying attention can see that people aren't good with nuance. People in a general sense. Like specific people, when you talk one to one you can like eke out nuance. But like in terms of a large population, it really is just like it's this or that. You know,
Yeah.
we're locked down and you do nothing or you do everything. But like testing, there's no like testing is sort of like the prodding into this like entire black and white spectrum, right? Or not even
Yeah.
spectrum, like black and white, just like panel, right? There's a black panel and white panel, but there's like the line in between them is like a straight line. And testing is really just like probing through. Is like, oh wait, maybe it's like Battleship or something. It's like, is this part okay? Is this part okay? And like, there's
Just feeling out both sides.
yeah, and like the inability for some people to like be comfortable with doing the thing that other people say that you're not supposed to do, or like the social zeitgeist. You know, like this is a problem that we've all been seeing with like Democrats and Republicans, left and right, or with this and that. It's like this is the general thing that we're supposed to do, that people are telling us to do, and there's no exceptions. You know, like testing,
Yeah.
like testing allows there to be exceptions, but and it's just like so sad. It's the limited thinking that we have, or that big we, I guess. Like I think you and I are in favor of like individual thinking and figuring out, but just so many people aren't willing to look at the specific case and just want to know that like a like thing from group A is bad, so we're going to respond with the way that we're always going to do. Like it's pre-programming, you know, like algorithms. The I was listening to a podcast that was on Joe Rogan. They were talking about uh, LSD and acid, and the topic was a little bit different. It was more about how it's useful for reprogramming people's brains. Like as you get
Yeah.
older, you sort of follow this algorithm. Like every interaction, you sort of have an algorithm that you just sort of like export when you meet a certain kind of situation. And like in terms of neuroscience, it makes sense because you know it takes a lot of mental energy to figure out each situation as a novel thing and figure out and like think about what you're going to do this time and separate from that time and what are the new circumstances this time. But like it's sort of disappointing for me, I guess, because like I'm always willing to rethink about each situation, and I get that that's tiring, but that's how I enjoy, and that's how I'm naturally geared to think. First of all, the
Yeah.
other thing is it's so annoying because it's a fucking novel pandemic. You know, there's literally novel, like this is new. This has never happened before, and like people still aren't willing to think about it with nuance, like as if it's a new
Yeah.
thing. Like even new things people will treat as if it's old. And I think the problem with that, and maybe what causes that, where that comes from, is like there's a new situation, but the groupthink is applicable to all. You know, it's sort of like I don't know. Let me think of like just spitballing analogies. It's like you have a like in a game, you lean on this like one combo or this one weapon or whatever. Like you always just like you always have your fallback or whatever. Like I don't know, like in Pokemon
Yeah.
or something, where you have like, oh, I don't. This is a new area I don't know anything about. I'm gonna use this Pokemon. You know, it's like, but there's, like it's not a game. You know, this is life. We can like just we can test things out and figure things out and like use new information and actually think. You know, and
Yeah.
I guess that's my problem with like education. There's just not a lot of teaching of how to think and figure things out that are new instead of like regurgitation. Like we're just taught to like remember these specific things so that when this scenario happens, use this specific thing. And it's just sad, you know? I don't think
Yeah.
the human brain needs to work in that way. I don't think the human brain is a regurgitation machine, you know?
Yeah. I just read a little story today
Mm-hmm.
about ulcers
Oh, yeah.
and how it was common knowledge that it was caused by like eating spicy food
Mm.
and like stress. Like
Mm-hmm.
everyone thought that stress cause ulcers.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and no one really cared to like do more research.
Yeah.
The solution was, just like
We already
have
know the answer, right?
it was like have this medicine.
Yeah.
Um, whatever.
Stop
So the
worrying.
medicine company, like they don't care about solving the new solution. And this one guy, like just was like playing with like bacteria and stuff. And he was playing with them, and he like let one out for too long, and it was something different. And somehow he found the connection that like it was this bacteria was like surviving in like conditions that they thought couldn't like the stomach acid. They thought bacteria would never be alive there. So I found this one and he like drank it like to for science to like prove if it had stomach ulcers. And he
Mm-hmm.
was like humiliated. He was like laughed out of all the science things because no one wanted to like accept his idea. They're like, oh, he's crazy. He's like he drinks his own stuff. He's
Yeah.
whatever.
Self-medicating off a theory. I just
Yeah.
googled it.
But
Barry Marshall and Robin Warren were awarded the Nobel Prize
yeah,
for
yeah,
exactly
exactly.
this. It.
Turns out they were right, and it's
Yeah.
bacteria, and now it's ulcers aren't like a problem.
Yeah.
That's
It's solved by antibiotics. Like people. Like it sort of reminds me of how in the past we, as the human race, knew, in quotes, knew that from dead flesh came flies. Like it's just like
yeah,
flies spontaneously came out of dead flesh, without realizing that like other flies actually were just laying eggs and made maggots, and that there was a process, right? It's just like
yeah.
people. This is why I like to advocate like knowing something is death. Like that is when you die. Like when you get to a conclusion, that's the death of that. Like a death is just the end. And like once you know something, it stops there. So that's a form of death, right? Always not knowing is that's how you stay alive. That's how you stay young. And
I
yeah,
yeah.
the other thing that I was gonna say though is first, if you have this is the process in which truth is made. First, one person has a truth, and then that is chastised and made embarrassed, and then it's resisted against, and then eventually, after those two steps, it eventually becomes understood as common knowledge, which is just so funny,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh, it's obviously this, but that's only after first people say you're wrong, and then they say no, you're not only wrong, and push back and resist it, and it's I don't I think people it's all confirmation bias. It's like there was a video that I learned recently when you're showing kids new foods, right? Like they're going to not like it for the first, I think they said 7 times. So the first 7 times, unless it's like candy, unless it's like a drug, like sugar is a drug, right? So unless it's
Yeah.
like something absurd and not natural in nature, not normally found in nature, they're not going to like it for the first 7 times. And they're going to meet it with disgust the first like 4 times. And eventually they'll be like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Like as you're eating it, you have to be there with the kid and you're going to eat it. You're going to show that it's normal. And then you're going to like, oh, look at how great it is. And you can tell the story about it. And they get a little interested and the parents are eating it more. And like, okay, I guess maybe I'll try it. But then they try it after like the 4th time and they're still not going to like it. Right? It's only until like the 7th time, it's like, okay, I guess it's okay. And like, I sometimes ask myself this though, like, is everything an acquired taste? Is everything an acquired skill? Is everything just time? Is everything a function of just like how many times have you done it? Like I don't know if this is cynical, but I think of this with like love and relationships too. It's not like you find someone and you're like, oh man, you're like you and I have all the variables and attributes checked to be best friends or like husband and wife. Like, boom, we're getting married
Yeah.
tomorrow. It's like, no, you find someone that like has the potential to do these things, but then you have to like go through like lots and lots of experiences, and that connection of experiences brings people together, and that's how you like people. That's how you like food. That's how you like music. Like everything is nostalgia in a way. And
Yeah.
it sort of makes me sad, you know? Like it sort of makes
Well,
me
it's
sad
it's
that like
it's
this is
like what
not
you were saying
special.
before
Yeah.
about like knowledge is death. Like
Mm.
you never want to have 100% knowledge on like the person you're dating.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's all that'd be boring if you knew everything about them, if you were never surprised by them.
That's true.
Like you want to like discover them. It's like you get little pieces of knowledge,
Yeah,
but
that's
like you
true.
don't want to reach the end. Like you want to get like 99%.
Yeah. They're I'm not appreciating like, maybe I wasn't appreciating fully the process and the journey of discovering these things. I guess what makes me sad though is like I don't know if like soulmates or like the things that are right, like two puzzle pieces that fit that are right. Like it just might not work because of time, you know? Like there just
Yeah.
wasn't the right kind of initial investment. Like a sort of what this is sort of reminding me of like startups. Like it doesn't matter if you have a good idea, good leadership, good people, all of the above. If you just don't have the starting principle, like it just doesn't get off the ground. Like so many things just don't get off the ground because not because it didn't warrant it, didn't merit it. It just wasn't given a chance. My I always have this example. Like I feel like everything. I feel like seeds and plants and trees are like an example, like a metaphor for everything. But it's the metaphor here is like it doesn't matter if you have like the seed with the perfect genome to grow like the best apples or whatever fruit or cucumber thing you want to talk about. Like it doesn't matter if it has the best genetics to be the most fruitful crop ever. If you never plant it or if you plant it in soil that's never
Yeah.
watered and it never rained or whatever, like it doesn't matter. Like it does potential isn't always like achieved and doesn't always achieve its potential. That's sort of like the definition, right? Sometimes it just fails.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely it happens in the beginning because that's the only time it can happen.
Hmm.
Like you go on a bad date, the first date is a bad date. That's it. It's over.
Yeah.
But if the eighth date's a bad date, like they're gonna like that doesn't matter as
Yeah.
much.
It's
You know,
true.
if once the seed has built roots and has a couple leaves and stuff, not watering it isn't gonna matter as much as when it was still like
Hmm.
just starting out first couple days.
That's something I need to tell myself more because I'm actually not the best at like I think I'm pretty good at first impressions when I meet in person and can talk and whatever, but I'm not. I don't put in the legwork to like dress up and look like clean myself up. You know, like I don't. That's something that I. But it's not just with dates. It's also with like marketing and resumes and like what you were talking about with work and like finding jobs and stuff. Like getting a what's it called letter, the letter of recommendations or what the hell is the thing that you this is how bad I am. I don't remember the term. The when you apply to a job, cover letter. Yeah, I would almost never write a cover letter, which is just really dumb, right?
Yeah.
And like this is something that God, this is a terrible thing to say in the first episode of a podcast, but we'll probably just edit it out, right? But this is sort of a problem with being like talented or gifted. Not to say that I'm, the best person ever, but like on the bell curve, given that there's a bell curve, like I've been lucky enough to be pretty fortunate with like starting stats if we're talking about like an RPG.
Yeah.
But
Yeah, seriously.
I'm starting to realize though that like being good at something doesn't just mean you're better. Like everything is a give and take, even good, quote unquote good, right? Like good, it really is sort of like an RPG where like you get some certain amount of stats, and like being good at this one thing means that you have less time and you have put less points into something else. Like specifically, like what we're talking about here is being a natural at something means that you're putting less points and less experience points throughout your life in practicing something that you're not good at, right? Like if you're
Yeah.
naturally good at something, that means you've never, or not never, but you practice much less frequently working on something to get better because you're already naturally good at it. And I'm starting to realize
Yeah.
that like that's sort of more important, you know, because it's sort of like to go back on that example of the seed thing, right? Like it doesn't matter if like the natural talent is sort of the ability to have like generate more seeds that have a lot of potential. But like we said before, having a bunch of seeds with nowhere to pot them and nowhere to like and not the build like not getting the skill to get water, you know, and like
Yeah.
constantly and like consistently watering your seeds, then it doesn't matter if you have so many good seeds, you know?
Yeah.
Like maybe one of them will luckily sprout from like some kind of like Deus Ex Machina or something, but like no, it like it you need all of the above, you know, you need skill, you need being gifted helps, but like you need to work hard and you also need luck and like
And motivation.
motivation. That's the other thing that sort of goes away too when you're gifted too. Like being gifted is sort of the worst out of all of them because then if you're gifted, you don't have the determination and the something that I'm really jealous of is people that aren't quote unquote gifted or whatever. Like they have this fire, they have this drive to like work really hard to prove them wrong. Like there's
Rock
so many
Lee.
stories.
Rock Lee.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Rock. But there's so many stories of like this goes out to all my haters. Or I was just watching a stand-up special with Ari Shafir, where he was talking about Biggie Smalls, and where he has that song where he opens up with "This goes to all the teachers that told me that I wouldn't be anything," and it's like there's so many stories. There's countless stories of people that are like that made it, quote unquote, made it to prove the haters wrong, and like this is like the most maybe like less sympathetic or less relatable way to complain. But I don't know if it's first world problems. I guess it is first world problems. But like I've been fortunate slash unfortunate enough to like be quote unquote gifted, not gifted. I mean, yeah, very fortunate, right? In many ways, like a lot of things comes easy to me. I never really had to work hard to do what I was doing before, at least. You know, I have my parents that are supportive, you know, and good like support network around me, and never really had to worry about like having food. You know, there was no one that was
Yeah.
like, "Oh no, you're not going to amount to anything." Like I had the opposite problem. Like everyone was like, "Oh, you're going to be like something special one day." I even have like in I guess Eastern like hand reading thing. I have on my palms. There's this the fortune line that goes all the way across. I don't really care about this stuff as much, but this just goes to show. Like I have like my fortune line go like all the way through and almost around the sides of my hand on both of my hands, which is rare. So it's like, oh man, you're gonna be like super wealthy one day and like a star, and I'm just like looking back on it now, it just like, oh man, it sort of fucks me up, you know, like like I guess for sake of podcast because we're re-recording, uh, the first like competition that I entered in for art, like I got second place in the National Scholastic Art Competition, and got into the MoMA like right away. You know, like I was in middle school and shit like that like fucks you up though. You know, it's like you think that it would help. It's like oh you're successful and like you're gonna ride that energy or whatever. But like no, like it's similar to like child actors. You know, or
Yeah.
maybe a better analogy is like uh, winning the lottery. You know, like
Yeah.
it's there's like something that I'm starting to realize more is there's no such thing as good or bad. You know, like even evil, there's no such thing as evil. Evil is just someone else's good, and someone's good is someone else's evil. Like,
Yeah.
like the it's all about a measure of magnitude. Everything's a vector. You know, like the vector can be long and of high magnitude, but the direction in which the vector is going is sort of more important. You know,
Yeah.
and
I mean, there's plenty of
yeah,
people who have the skill or gifted, but also just have the motivation.
yeah.
Like Michael Phelps, right? He's just physically built to be a swimmer,
Mm-hmm.
like just biologically.
Mm-hmm.
But he also like works like every day, right? Like
Yeah,
we'll train to be the best.
it's the
You gotta
rarest
have
thing.
both. And yeah, but it's the most like special that you'll be the most successful.
There's really uh three measures, right? Like I say I think the best example that most people know are familiar with that has all three is Michael Jordan. Like naturally gifted, works hard, but also like the mental part of like sort of the competition part, like the drive part,
Hmm.
right? Like to
Yeah.
have all three is impossible. And Michael Jordan was just a freak of nature that had all three in like 11 out of 10.
Mhm.
Like everything
Yeah.
was fuel for him. He like couldn't stand losing, and like every little bit of any little slight against his like character, against his game, like he would just like that would fuel him for years and years and would just never let it go. And like that kind of thing like make pushes you to greatness. But the problem though with that is it's sort of like the Buddhist, I'm pretty sure it's a Buddhist quote, but wanting more is where suffering comes from.
Yeah.
You know, the idea of more. It's like inherently you must be unsatisfied for you to get better because you know, like I said, the knowing is death, but also being satisfied, and that's the stillness, right? Once you become satisfied, you're done. It's a something that comes up with art a lot. Is
Yeah.
like you never like your painting is never done. You just stop. You know, your drawing is never done. You just reached your deadline. You know,
I
and
was.
the entire process is always like this part sucks, this part sucks, this part sucks, and you make it better and you
Yeah.
make it better. And with a painting, you know, like there's stories of people that like go insane with a painting too, right? Like they've only did this one painting for their whole life and they just obsessed about it and went crazy. But like that, I see that not being very different, not all that different than like Michael Jordan or other people that are searching for greatness that like have always been looking for more and they get unsatisfied.
It's like the epitome of perfectionist.
Yeah.
But I was drawing the other day in a notebook, and I had like music on,
Mm-hmm.
like radio or yeah, and I was just drawing like abstract like shapes and shit, and it was so nice because like the tempo of the music, all this other factors like made it easy to think of stuff
Mm-hmm.
to just like draw. But the main reason was because the song ended, and the song ended, and that then my drawing was done. Like
Mm.
it ended it for me, and it had a nice. I could tell, they pick up the song, and then
Mm-hmm.
they slow it down at the end. So you could tell. You could say, oh, the end's coming. Let me just finish it up, and then it finished, and you're done, and you're happy, and you're satisfied with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's very helpful.
Yeah. There's no like clear like signals in life, you know, like everything's sort of arbitrary and everything has to be sort of like like justified. The word that comes to mind is justified, you know. And like to me, when I think justify is actually really one of my favorite words also because like justify means also like to give credence to, right? Like make it important. But to me, justify really is sort of like when you're measuring something, right? Like when you're making like furniture or you're cutting wood and you're doing carpentry, right? Like justifying is also like is the idea of like you have your base block of wood and you're trying to make other pieces of wood fit to that piece of wood. So you like put it up against it and you cut that distance, or like you're like justifying to like that side of the wall, and you like when you're justifying to that wall that you're measuring from that point, that wall to another point, and like you can justify to a different point on the wall, and like if and then like that's a different start point, you know. It's like sort of a measure of where you're starting from, like what are you like building off of, and to me that's more indicative of what it means to justify something. Like it's that point in which you're starting from is arbitrary, but that arbitrary point is the thing that now you're setting your scope from, that you're justifying from. And
Yeah.
like I think life, maybe not all of life, but at least humanity, you know, we sort of are like, you know, so many people are asking about or wonder about the meaning of life and this and that, but it's ultimately just what are we justifying to, because I think people are slowly starting to realize and starting to become more and more clear to a lot of people that, yeah, there's no meaning to life in the biggest sense. There's no uppercase T truth. There's no uppercase M meaning. It's all just sort of chaos. Life and
Yeah.
existence happens, and nature is a cruel mistress. And but cruel is like is presuming intention, right? It's just sort of really doesn't care. It's apathetic. And
Yeah.
like the 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 fact of the matter is that meaning does exist to some degree, but only arbitrarily, and that meaning is how we like justify to things. And the the pessimists of us, right, will see that there's no meaning and maybe be in denial and like try to like fight back against it. But I think that's the the wrong way, the worst way to interpret that. There being no meaning isn't to say that it's meaningless. Like literally it is obviously, but sort of play on words where it's open ended, I guess is the way that I would interpret it. To that I would describe it. It's sort of like the blank page problem, but with like philosophy and meaning. And
Yeah.
it's like a fresh playground. It's a fresh lot of sand in a sandbox. You have all these tools and you can make your own tools. It's like Minecraft. There you go. It's like Minecraft. It's just an
Life
infinite
is like
toolbox.
Minecraft.
Life is the ultimate game. And like, I think about that actually. Like, life being a game, I think makes a lot of sense to me because it's sort of literally the best game. Because I've been sort of getting like falling out of love with games and disassociating with games because I was a gamer for most of my life, but as I've been getting older, I've been realizing like, oh, I sort of get games. I get the point. Every game
Yeah.
ultimately is designed such that you stop playing. Like the ultimate goal of a game is you stop playing the game, right? Like even multiplayer games, competitive games, like eventually if you like reach the maximum ideal, and it's going to be a lot harder in online multiplayer games, but once you beat everyone and you're the best at it, the hypothetical limit, then you would stop, right? Like this is why it's so crazy and strange and unique, honestly, for someone like Michael Jordan to exist, where he was the best of the best, but that just wasn't enough, right?
Yeah.
Like that's so rare because once you get there, then the only thing driving you to keep going is self hate. Honestly, you have to hate yourself. You have to like I'm not even using the word lightly. Like you have to like have this desire to like crush your past self because at
Yeah.
that
That
point you're
you
just
can't like.
competing.
Yeah, you can't accept victory. Like
Yeah,
it's not enough.
that's not enough. Like you like can't because that's that sort of death, and in a way that's sort of the only way to like keep that alive. But I think that life is sort of either masturbatory or too like limited, for the rest of all of life because that's only a game, a sub game within the whole game within life. And the the disassociation though from it, I realize like from games and stuff is like you ever play roguelikes and you ever like
Um.
start off a game, you start off a run, and like the whole mechanic, the main thing about roguelikes is you lose and you start over again,
Oh,
right?
is it like Enter the Gungeon? I
Yeah,
haven't
that's a
played that.
roguelike. Yeah.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of
Yes.
games like this where it's like, okay, there's a little bit of variance and you start out, but then as soon as you start, you just like had a really shitty start,
Yeah.
right? And you're like, whatever, just restart. Don't even die, just like restart the game, leave and just restart and get a fresh
Yeah.
start. And I realized like if life was a game and people knew that it was a game, like the consequences of restarting like is tied with games, right? So the better the game, like the like you would necessitate it would be required that you don't want to just restart right? There has to be consequences to restarting, right? And like I think of this as like a game designer, right? Designing life. Like if you were to design life, like if you made it like inconsequential to restart, then that would be pretty terrible. You know, like everyone would just be
Yeah.
like, "Oh, I got born in like middle class family. Psh, reset, like restart, and just
Yeah.
hit reset until you're like Bill Gates' son or something like that, right?" It's like,
Right.
why,
Yeah.
like why
As
would
soon
you?
as you have like consciousness of like who you are as a person,
Yeah,
just
it's like, oh fuck, this scuffed run, fucking run sucks.
yeah.
Reset the seed, you know, and
Yeah.
like, cause that's what sort of like is my interpretation or way to like, think about this life being meaningless thing, right? It's like it's only special because you only have this one shot, right? Like making each moment matter, making your life matter. Like that's what makes it matter. It's sort of like what you were saying before about like relationships. It's like it would be so sad if you just like got to the end, you know? And like
Yeah.
like the whole point is getting through it. Like I'm this book that I'm really slowly working on just because having to, like getting through depression and all of that is like had
Yeah.
caused
Yeah.
me to like put it down so many times. But the moral of the story is just like after time travel happens, it's just like yeah, like once you like what's the point then? Like you can
Yeah.
jump to the end of everything. Like but it the and this isn't a spoiler because it's like in the first chapter, but the analogy that I bring to it is very much like people reading a book. Like as soon as you pick up a new book, you don't skip to the end of the book. Like that would like what's like
Yeah.
start a new movie and be like, oh, tell me what happens. Okay, cool, I'm done. Like
Yeah.
it's the pauses, it's the moments in between the plot points that makes it so much more meaningful. You know,
Right.
like it's like listening to music at like 8 times speed. Like what the fuck are you doing? Like
Yeah.
it's like I just want
Or just like the 5 seconds. Like if
yeah,
you only listen to 5 seconds of each song, like the best part,
or just
the
like
beat
look at the
drop.
sheet
Yep.
music. Just like no, okay, got
Yeah.
it. This is what okay, got it.
Yeah.
Like no, like and that's sort of life, you know. Like to ask the question, what's the meaning of life? Is like what like life is the meaning of life, you know.
Yeah. Living.
Living. There you go. That's a great way to put it. Oh my god, I think that's the answer. What's the meaning of life? Living. You know,
Yeah.
this is something that I actually think about. It's a bit of a tangent, but I'm into linguistics and I like learning about languages. I don't like learning languages because I hate memorizing things. And turns
Mm.
out learning languages sort of equates to memorizing vocabulary, which I hate memorizing. But the idea of language to me, I think, is really interesting because it's the way that we like frame our thoughts. And some of the most basic things about language that I think is really interesting is like this interplay, this relationship between nouns and verbs, right? The concept of like the thing, the solid thing, but also then the action, the way that that thing
Yeah.
dances and moves and interacts, right?
Yeah.
And like life is living, right? Like I think
Yeah.
you what you said is like really beautiful. That makes a lot of sense. Like life is living. That is the meaning. And like meaning is like a meta framework that we apply to things that we like invented after language, right? Like meaning
Yeah.
is a tool that we used within language to explain language, but that has no bearing to life. Life
Yeah.
precedes meaning by a lot. Like I'm sort of reminded actually there was I was learning traditional calligraphy, or many Westerners would call Chinese, a little bit from my parents. Yeah, apparently in the East it's just called calligraphy. But there's a term that I forgot because, like I said, terrible at memorizing things. But there's a term for the first brush stroke, right?
Yeah.
And it's sort of similar to like the first letter of a word in English. But in the same way
Yeah.
that you just sort of describe, like, there's no name for what I just said. It's the first letter in a word,
Yeah. It's just like important.
right? But it's like a phenomenon that emerges from a language. But
Right.
there was a term that they said that's verbally used to describe this thing in
Yeah.
Chinese, right? The first brushstroke. There's like a specific word for
Yeah.
it, but there's no written word of it. There's no like way to write down that
Yeah.
word in ancient
Yeah.
calligraphy. It's just like that's just a thing, and like I just find that so funny, right? It's like that. Like we think of language, right? We think of words as like this like truth. We like a lot of people like apply like uppercase T truth to words, right? But I mean, people will say this all the time, but I feel like people don't think about it as deeply, or maybe not deeply, but like consistently as I do, like constantly as I do. But like all words are fucking made up. Like everything's made up.
Mhm.
Society, civilization, everything's made up. Like another joke that I say often is that every word is an onomatopoeia onto itself. The sound of that word is like is an onomatopoeia, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
just bang or like clap, right? It's like the word is an onomatopoeia for that
Yeah.
shape of your mouth and vocal cords to say the word. And
Yeah.
the the to bring it back into like bigger issues and stuff like that. I think this kind of like lack of thinking and application of words and concepts like applies to society. It's like, oh, like I don't know, Democrat bad or Republican bad. It's like, oh, I know how to, like, this has been put into this box and I'm not even going to think about it, right? And like I think since we're shooting shots already at everything, like I think this is my problem with lots of like religions, right? Or like not even religions per se, but like this is a problem that happens with people with like group thought. But like I guess to put it more broadly, I think the word good has been weaponized. Good and bad is weaponized.
Right. Because it, yeah,
You know?
it separates.
Yeah. Like
And
we
then
don't
it's like
ask what it
one
is.
truth, one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like everything is propaganda. Like everything is sort of
And
put into a box by people of authority, or not necessarily governments, but like people that like have power, like like influencers or celebrities and stuff like that. Or just parents. Like we sort of learn things through exposure, right? This sort of has to do with what we were talking about before of like, is everything just an acquired skill and acquired taste? But like we also have acquired morals, you know?
there is like a motivation like across humanity. Like everyone lives and contributes s- to humanity. I mean, I guess like some people, you know, as people can contribute like overall.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if that's if there's like more motivation there, like if humans work together, if on average, like I you can't like classify, you can't like quantify motivation, but is there more like motivation on an individual level or like collectively that people contribute?
I think what you're getting at is something that I've been thinking about, that I thought about for a while, of like the 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 problem I think is there's a restriction on how we can either like empathize or see, like you say motivation, but I see that as like the drive, more of like a driving force of someone's actions, right? Which is motivation,
Mhm.
right? But like I think that like people don't take into account the like it's it's sort of a function of like all the things that they're taking into consideration before they make a judgment, right? And selfishness honestly is just taking into account less people, because like no one's completely selfish for just their own benefits, right? It's their friends, their family, their loved ones. Like if they were so selfish, then they would just live on an island somewhere or something, right? Or like not have any loved ones. which is really
Yeah.
rare. I mean, I guess given it does happen sometimes, maybe, but all like we're social creatures, so it's eventually comes down to the helping some, like not helping, but like sharing to some degree. But the like the fault, the flaw is, I think, like sort of breaks down to short sightedness. You know, people don't give to strangers because they see them as the other as opposed to like their fellow brothers, right? Like a simple thought experiment would be like, oh, that homeless person that you don't, share your home with. Let's say everyone in the world died besides you and that homeless person from some freak accident. Like, you guys would probably be roommates, like maybe share
Yeah.
the same bed, right? Like, that's not even like a much of a leap. That's just like, yeah, of course you would. There's fucking wolves and bears.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
you guys are gonna be roommates right away, and like that's. But the thing is, like at that given time in that given moment, like when you're with that homeless person, that like truth of thinking and of the other person that way is entirely like manufactured, you know? Like it's just societal
Yeah.
norms and like expectations that prevents us from seeing each other in that way. And it's sort of ridiculous. And like all of it's ridiculous, right? But I find it sort of sad though because like the the name of my book that I'm working on is Sin of Lag, right? The Sin of Lag. And I sort of see it this way, whereas it's like if everyone just like gave to each other instantaneously, like immediately, then everyone would have all of the money in the world,
Hmm.
right? Like just like imagine if everyone, Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, you and me, and the Sultan of Sudan, like everyone just had this shared a bank account, right? Like if everyone did, everyone would be the richest person in the world simultaneously, right? Because it's just
Yeah.
like, because think about how silly it is, right? It's like, oh, okay, like I'll pay you $1 billion, $1 trillion for that Rubik's cube or your headset, and it goes into your wallet, and then now
Yeah.
you buy something else, and like it breaks down a little bit with like manufacturing and stuff like that. Like maybe people would be less inclined to work, but people would still do that, like make the things that they want to, and do like want to be productive. And also, more things should be automated anyway. But this is a long aside.
Yeah.
I really think that we could like this lag, right? Like I break it down as lag. It's this reluctance to figure out and think about like like systems and peoples and interactions in this way. Like if it's sort of like in a way lag that stops us from like being able to see that homeless person as like, oh, you're my brother, or that interaction of like giving exchange of like, oh, if I like, it's just because we haven't like grown to love each other yet that I don't tip that waiter all of my money, because if we did fully love each other, then I could give them all of my money and then right now because they need it, but then they would give it back right away if I need it, right? Like that lag of that interaction, like you can just break it down as lag. And
It's like
yeah.
going back to the very beginning with familiarity of like
Mm-hmm.
children eating like 7 times
Mm-hmm.
before they like a food. It's familiarity of like any person. Like I bet if you saw this homeless person like on your commute every day, like
Mm-hmm.
I at the bottom of the stairs, maybe one day you'll have enough and you'll like get out of here.
Mm-hmm.
And then and you see him a couple weeks later and then you're like, yeah, yeah, like like what's your name? Like just like
Mm-hmm.
slowly, eventually familiarity. Then maybe you'll be friends with him. Like
Mm-hmm.
still if you see him on like for a year.
Yeah. To be fair, there's
Um
also more though. There's like the like lag from the other side, right? I sort of see it as like this river, right? But there's like three parts of the river. There's where you are and what your river you're giving to the homeless person, but you're afraid that there's going to be lag from upstream from you, right? Like you need to wait for a flow to get to you, and giving all of your money down the stream, even if you are like fully love and trust the other person, like you can't just, if there's a lag, like shortening and getting rid of the lag to give to the other person, I think is commendable and honorable, and I agree with that. But like that lag behind you of how you receive things is also something that people worry
Yeah.
about. And my I think that's sad though, because that's the same problem, right? Just like now from A to B, or from B to C, it's A to B, you know?
Yeah. It's like dominoes.
Yeah.
Like if like one person is like greedy, they're in like a
Mm-hmm.
secret Santa.
Mm-hmm.
If one person like doesn't give a gift, unless you have like a person who's like forgiving and being like, you know what,
Mm.
I don't care that I didn't get a gift, like I'm still gonna give one.
Mm-hmm.
They're like a person that like is like a leaves a gap in the
Mm-hmm.
dominoes, where
Yeah.
then it falls and then it ends, and then you got a new track.
Yeah. It's it all boils down to lag, you know? And there's I think I could be wrong here, but I think the term also works the other way around too, where if you maybe it's not in second thought, but you can give a little bit of lag, you can give a little slack, right, to the rope, so that it can be like taken up later, right?
Yeah,
But there, like, traditionally, historically, we haven't had this kind of surplus, right? Like, we've been in a scarcity world, right?
yeah,
But we're sort of at post scarcity, you know? Like, there's this long transition between like this lag, right? This transition between like scarcity, like we production wise, we're past scarcity, and this lag is just from distribution, you know? It's all logistics.
yeah,
And it's sort of sad though, because like if we just automate certain parts, you know, like automating is what like stops a lot of the lag, you know? The In the same way, like moving like buckets of energy or water, in this, to use an example analogy, like people handing the buckets of water like would be slower than like pulling a rope, which would be slower than like electrons moving in a wire, you know?
yeah,
Like this is sort of the reason why, like, I wouldn't say maximalist, but like cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin, Ethereum, Dogecoin, even, like all of these things, right? They this is transferal. This is all a transferal of energy, right? Money is just potential energy, you know. It's this
yeah,
capital to allow like things to happen at a different rate between people, and in exchange of one person's work to another place than another person would do, and it's all just could be measured as energy, you know. And
yeah.
like there's just so many inefficiencies, you know. It all, that's the thing that annoys me, is all inefficiencies, it's all lag. And just like if we can just break out of all of that, and like it's just so frustrating, like seeing it from like this top up point of view. It's like looking at a highway, right? Like imagine a highway, and you see like this is a phenomenon that is well measured and people can look it up, but like when someone like hits the brake at one point
Yeah.
in front of the line of cars, like that like has a ripple effect that goes backwards, that like gets bigger and bigger though, until it's like a
Yeah.
hold up, right? Like there will be so much traffic, and there's not even an accident, you know. Like cars
Yeah.
will be fucking still on the highway because of one person like passed weird, and the person behind them had to hit the brakes.
Yeah.
They didn't even crash, they just slow down, you know. And it's this lag that's similar to like technology, you know. There's this
Yeah.
lag of people like resistant to automation, which rightfully so, right? Like they don't want to get their jobs automated because they need jobs to live for the next month or so, but they
Yeah.
don't. They're fighting back all of this change, even though if everything was automated, and then like the people that own the jobs actually did give the money, like, and there was like universal basic income and stuff like that, then people wouldn't do jobs that they didn't want to do that could be automated, and everyone wouldn't have to work in those traditional jobs,
Right.
and we can do different things to find fulfillment that was actually more fulfilling. And like people would be automating like making food, and people would have food and stuff like that, but there's this lag of like, no, I don't want them to do that, I don't want them to do this, like that, I need this and I need that, and then that person that's relying on them needs this and they need that, and person relying on them needs this and that. And
That's why we need a UBI first.
I think so. I think so. There's We need that slack, you know.
Yeah, exactly. The person on the highway who's like left a big distance between
Yes.
that person who breaks, and then it's fine.
Yes. Oh my
The
god.
gap in the dominoes.
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. this is the reason why whenever I drive, I put a lot of space in between. But like
Yeah.
for the people that don't know, like the best way to stop that pile up, that traffic, is just cars being spaced out a little bit more, or like similar to the electrons and buckets thing, like cars are automated. Which
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of. I don't want to drive. I'd rather sleep in cars. But like it's like everything that's a system can be broken down in this way of like a series of slack and lag, you know? And it's just so sad because like there's slack in terms and lag in terms of money, in terms of power and influence and love, right? And morals, people just are and taste for music and stuff like that and foods. And I'm sort of hopeful. I'm hopeful that society can use all of these things to, you know, propel humanity to something that, you know, we've never seen before. Post scarcity. We have the we're at a really exciting point of in humanity in our uppercase our lives, but this transition is also really dangerous, right? It's really scary, right? Like there's a lot of fear and potential danger in that we're already too late, right? Like
Yeah.
with every new technology, like the first forays into that technology, like a kid playing with fire or a kid playing with some kind of weapon or whatever, like there's the danger to hurt ourselves, like with the classic example of nuclear weapons. That's happened. We
Yeah.
did burn ourselves multiple times. And like AI is one of those things, like as we go up the tech tree of technology, like the potential is a measure of potential increasing, right? Fire was really hard to kill all of us, but like guns get more dangerous and bombs more dangerous and nuclear weapons more dangerous and artificial intelligence arguably more dangerous, right? But all of these things like have this cost of potential and danger of if we slip up how much damage that will do, because that's how potential works. But
Yeah.
it's we can solve all of our problems or we can ruin everything. And the thing that is scary though is we already set this. It's like we sort of set the ball rolling and then roll it like these balls, right? And some of them like have already been like going for so long that maybe like the thing that the other ball that would save that was to help it might have been going and might be set to go faster but still won't catch up, because then the first ball
Yeah.
that I'm talking about is like climate change. Like it's
Yeah.
possible that ball that we set rolling so long ago and have been pushing along faster and faster, like for a while through the industrial era, has such a head start that green energy that we are doing great things and we're doing greater things at a faster rate as technology goes on. There was just such a long head start that humanity being such of a novice or in our adolescence and our recklessness, we just didn't recognize that it might be too late, right? It's scary, like
Yeah.
we didn't notice the effects of climate change until like recently, like sort of like these past couple of years when like everything is sort of like fucking ocean's on fire, dude. Like shit like that, right?
Yeah.
And hurricanes and thunderstorms and you know ice caps melting. Like it's possible that like that ball has been set rolling and it's already getting worse, and the change of like cutting back like is going to slow the rate, but that rate might have already like been like that curve of how it's going to be projected to go might already be too late. It's really
Yeah.
scary. Just
I mean, that's
yeah.
fat. Yeah. If you drop the balls at like the same height, like one on like a just a straight ramp down and one like curves a little bit,
Yeah.
uh, the curved one gets there first, which is new technology. But I probably agree that that's if they're like going at the same rate, then that curve
Yeah.
is faster.
Yeah.
But
That's
it's like already down here.
yeah, exactly. Sorry, like almost at the end, right? Um, that's an interesting point, though. Just to tangent off of something that's a little less grim and dire. Uh, I'm sure you saw the MythBusters GIF or whatever where they like figured it out.
Yeah.
But a straight line is the shortest distance, but there's you can make a curve based on like the radius of a circle and stuff like that. And there's a specific term that I can look up, but it's on that note, right? Another counterintuitive physics thing is if you have a straight slope, right? That's like an even gradient, and you rolled a ball down it, versus something that had ups and downs, right? Like if you have the curves of the ups and downs set correct, the ball that is rolled down the ups and downs will go further, will go even farther than the ball that's going on a straight slope, which is sort of wild, right? Like
Yeah.
it it's counterintuitive, like, but like I think it's a beautiful metaphor for life, you know? It's like it's from the ups and downs that like pushes you forward. It's from the like everything oscillates, you know? And I think people like get discouraged when they're at a low, right? But it's funny, like it even lows, right? Is a funny term, like that low being going low, like going on a downward slope, like it picks up speed for a ball,
Yeah.
right? So like you can see that as a positive thing. It's all perspective, you know. Like
Yeah.
I learned a lesson of perspective during the pandemic that was pretty interesting, where so I was living back home with my family, and my brother, my mom, and my dad each have a car to go to work and stuff, right? And my brother like just bought a new car, right? And then, or he was in the works to buy a new car. And my parents, though, unfortunately, like both of their cars back to back. Like my mom's car broke down, and then my dad's car broke down, and it's just like, what? Like we just got this new car. We would have like had three cars now, and like worst, like what a bad timing, right? Like we can't
Yeah.
enjoy
Yeah.
like having all these things, right? But it's like all just it really is perspective, though, right? Because like I was talking to my mom, and she was like, "Oh, what a good timing that like now we have a reliable new car." And my brother's car was breaking down, so like if both my parents' cars broke down earlier, then we would have had no cars. But now we have a reliable car, and it's like, oh
Yeah.
wait, yeah, duh, like this, that's a good thing, right?
Yeah.
And everything is like that, you know. It's like being in an accident gives you an appreciation for life, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. When you're on the lower slope, you can appreciate the higher slope more. And
Mm-hmm.
also just like going down a solid slope is like boring. It's like monotonous and it is slower. Time
Mm-hmm.
it seems slower, when you're bored versus you're having fun and your ups and downs.
Mm-hmm.
But it physically it is slower. I guess what was it? It went a shorter distance.
Mm-hmm.
You'll have a less life if it's boring. You'll live longer if it's funner.
It's like a roller coaster. You got to enjoy the ups and downs. Imagine going on a roller coaster that was a straight, just like a trolley.
Yeah.
Just like, okay. uh, hmm. All right. What have we learned?
Life is living on a roller coaster.
Life is a roller coaster. I think the takeaway that I want to remember is the meaning of life is living. That's a good quote.
I I I liked I got a newfound appreciation for like how time seems to like move exponentially. Like
Mm.
things get easier, like almost exponentially. And like
Mm.
the beginning is just gonna be the hardest part, in everything. So
Man,
stick
I
with
like
it.
beginnings. I like starting new things. My problem is like getting it going afterwards, like keeping it going. I mean,
Yeah.
but then again, that's arguably the beginning, isn't it? Like it, yeah. Uh, that's the other takeaway. Life is hard. uh,
It's hard living.
but yeah, I guess if it was easy, it would be boring.
Yeah.